I'm bringing in Will Dawson of CBN Sports right now, talking about this ban that the GOP has done on transgender women, basically men saying they're women playing in sports. It's been growing trend across the country, and finally it looks like someone's going to try to put a stop to this anyway. Will, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing good, and this has been such a hot button topic, Will, not just in the sports world, but it's sort of transcended that. And it's been really a crazy thing, almost a surreal thing to watch and see how, whether the intentions are good or not, to see the result here where you have males competing against females. And it's a crazy thing to watch. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in a lot of areas. There was just another video the other day, if we have the video of that, like a middle school or high school girls basketball game where can you spot the trans student here? Like, it's, you watch it, they're taller than everybody, running around just jumping higher, and this clip goes on and on and on, and it's just basket after basket, good 6-8 inches tall, jumping like that, like this. Look at the other girls, they can't jump and just continue jumping, get the rebounds, like Wilt Chamberlain in there against a bunch of kids. So but that's what these girls are experiencing across the country. And so it looks like this bill is going to try to stop that.
Yeah, like my friend John Stonestreet talks about, ideas have consequences, bad ideas have bad consequences. I just wonder how we got here and how we got here so fast, because this is happening, like you said, it's happening everywhere. It's happening basketball, it's happening in swimming, it's happening in track and field. Riley Gaines, who's done such great work trying to bring awareness of this problem that's happening. And I think the way that we have to look at it is twofold. I think we have to look at it from a practical standpoint, and I think we have to look at it from a theological standpoint. From a practical standpoint, you look at it and you see obvious differences in male and female. You can't separate the theological sometimes, because that is exactly how God created men and women. Title IX was such a huge thing for women's sports because it's the protection of women to give them fairness in their sports. And then what happens this past August is the Biden administration completely redefines sex to include gender identity. It really is a travesty on many levels, because you put the safety of these female athletes at risk. So when they're competing against someone that's much bigger and stronger in volleyball, think about that. You saw the athlete earlier at the end of last year take a spike off the face.
Yeah,
that's dangerous. And then you also have trans athletes, these biological males in female locker rooms, and this has been the cause of a lot of problems since this whole madness started. When you put females at risk inside the locker room for sexual assault. It's the exact thing, ironically, it's the exact thing that Title IX was meant to help them, to protect female athletes, and yet this flies in the face of it. In my opinion, at worst, it's ironic. At best, it's ironic. At worst, it's criminal here. So I'm glad to see that on the federal level, we are actually stepping in and trying to do something. The question is, even though it passed the House, passed Congress, will it get through the Senate? I don't know that it will. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I guess we'll have to wait and see, because I'm thinking about this, and the question I was going to have for you, Will. You're obviously interviewing lots of coaches and sports figures in throughout the sporting world, in college, and the younger ages, in professional. What's your sense, if any, on this issue? Because I think the students have to be frustrated. That clip we showed of the basketball game, when you're listening to it on the audio, that the parents are cheering every time this boy scores. And, that's insane to me, that these parents of these young girls more of them aren't infuriated and frustrated at this. So do you have a sense at all on what culture at large is feeling on this issue? Because it feels like, to answer your question on will it pass the Senate, I feel like if more parents were upset about this stuff, that absolutely the politicians would follow. So I guess that's my question for you is, do you have any sense on what parents at large across the sporting world feel?
It's kind of mind-blowing because I think what we saw with Trump's victory over Biden was that people are fed up with what's kind of been force-fed to them over the past 4 years. This is just part of that culture war that we see, that it really is being force-fed. Now, parents cheering this young man playing in the girls' sport, I don't know if they're getting caught up in the moment in trying to be compassionate. As Christians, we're called to be compassionate. There's nothing wrong with being compassionate to someone who has gender dysphoria. I believe that's a real thing. I think that people are confused. I think that the enemy would like to confuse people in such a way that makes them think that they're a sex that's different than what God designated to them. But ultimately, it comes down to what makes sense. You know, we take a look at what is fair for young girls and for young women, and I think the majority of Americans agree that it just doesn't make sense to put females at risk when it comes to males in sports.
Yeah. Yeah, and the standard is odd to me, because if the standard is, we need to make these trans students feel comfortable. Well, if feeling comfortable is the standard, why aren't you considering the comfortability of the girls? I cannot imagine that all these girls are comfortable with a guy coming in and dominating the game. And especially when it's individual sports, like we saw with swimming, Riley Gaines and others in the high school level, you're getting bumped out. I think it was in Connecticut. Some track runners were getting bumped out of either medal position or being able to compete in the state championships because of a man that, a young man that was up there and knocked them off the podium. I mean, that's just not right. And it's interesting to me that in the name of comfortability or feelings, they don't consider the other feelings. It's like you never see the other way, Will, where I correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot think of one example where it's the reverse, where it's a trans. I get confused in saying it, but let's just say it, a girl wanting to play in the boys' sports, right? And so you just don't see it. Why is that? Because there's clearly a difference. And I get frustrated when people say, oh, well, there's plenty of women who could beat guys. And well, that's true. But when you get to the same level, professional, college, high school, varsity level, junior varsity, if you go man for woman on those levels, it's just the way God made us. The man is going to be more physically dominant in those circumstances. And there's the occasional woman who breaks out of that mold and then tries to compete with the men. And that's great. That's incredible when somebody's a unicorn like that and they're able to do that. But by and large, the differences are stark when you match apples to apples as far as, the level that they're at, like, college Division I, college Division II, put the man versus the woman. It's always going to be that way. So I don't understand. Like you said, the common sense is just not there. You don't see it in the reverse. And where's the consideration for the comfortability of these girls who are being dominated?
It's like we're trying to accommodate to the outside fringe, the very small percentage. And when you do that, you hurt. You damage the majority. And unfortunately, we do live in a fair country and in that everyone has a chance. But when it comes to things like this, you can't just make everything equal, right? Because we know that there is a difference between men and women. Imagine if Caitlin Clark tried to go to the NBA.
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. You don't see women in Major League Baseball. You don't see women in football. And that's because, like you said, there's a reason for that. There's a big difference, and that's a good thing. God designed us in such a way that men have their strengths and women have their strengths. So we should celebrate those differences and not pander to someone who has dysphoria. Last I checked, the word dysphoria means confusion, right?
Yes.
If someone is confused about who they are, the last thing we need to do is to enable them in such a way that makes things worse for them.
Yeah.
So I would say,
yeah. No, and I agree with you 100%. And like, again, you follow the logic to its conclusion. And if it's just what people say they are, well, they think they're, this dysphoria, they think they're a woman, so we've got to let them do all the women things. Well, what if someone has dysphoria on their age? If I suddenly say, you know what, I really think I'm 12. Can I then go back and play middle school basketball? I mean, does that work? How does that work? If it's just, well, we need to make him feel comfortable. He's got age dysphoria. Of course you wouldn't do that. It's obvious, but I guess out of the name of, I'm not sure. I don't even know I don't know if it's activists or what. And I don't know how culture has gone down this road of just feeling bad. But the way, like you said, to help someone who has gender dysphoria is not to just play into the dysphoria and pretend it doesn't exist and just let them think, oh, yeah, you are actually that. No, as Christians, like you said, God made us male and female. We know this. The loving thing to do is to walk somebody through that. If they're in your circle and you have influence over them, is to walk somebody through the truth of how God made us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you asked if I had a sense of what parents are thinking in this whole thing. I think about college coaches who this is going to become, unless something on the federal level is passed, this is going to be something that becomes real, because college coaches, in my opinion, are afraid to speak out against this because the fear of retribution and what could happen with their jobs. And so I think we do need some protections to come from on a federal level so that we don't get any further down the road than we've already gotten. Because like you mentioned, it's a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I think to your point, we need college coaches and other coaches high school coaches to be brave and stand up, take a stand on this, stand up for the girls and the young women that you are coaching, and don't let it happen. And there have been some schools that have done that, where they said, no, we're not going to play teams that have, a man on their roster, in college. We're not going to do that. And good for them. And more of that needs to happen. And, my belief is always that politicians will follow the people and the will of the people. When they're clear about something, they will fall in line, mostly because they're spineless, but that's just the way it is. And so, but we need people to stand up first and foremost. And I think you're starting to see more of that. But Will, I appreciate. We'll definitely keep updated everybody on this. Stay tuned to CBNnews.com. Follow Will's updates on CBN Sports. You can follow our CBN Sports YouTube channel. Make sure we'll have the link there in the description of this podcast. You can follow all of Will's great reporting on sports. This is a tougher topic. Will is always highlighting faith in sports. We're seeing it in college football now. We talked about that the other day. It's great stuff. So, but on this one, I appreciate you stopping by and chatting about it, Will.
Thanks, Dan. Let's do it again.
Yeah.